Hello, I'm a student of Bhikkhu Candana. This is just a reminder that he is a homeless monk, depending entirely on donations to live and share the Dhamma. If you want to help support Bhante, our teacher, please consider donating to this cause. Thank you and enjoy.
Today, we continue our Sutta Exploration series with possibly two suttas instead of one, because they just flow so nicely with each other. And I'll try to see if I could do that. But we will begin with a lovely sutta, which helps us to even more so develop such tremendous faith in the Dhamma that Lord Buddha taught, and how relevant it was, the imagery, the similes that he provided to teach the principles and the way of life, especially the way of practice, because every individual has to work through their own hang-ups, views, especially opinions, and the reasons why we often find ourselves procrastinating, not putting in the energy and the time that this practice requires, or make our own versions of it. So today's sutta, the first one at least, it is the Janapadakalyāṇī Sutta, and it is, in English, I translate it as the most beautiful woman in all the land, and the most beautiful young woman, in all the land. And in a minute, we'll see as to what does that have to do with the sutta in this case, especially because it is coming from the Satipatthana section, from the Samyutta Nikaya, from the connected discourses. So, as I mentioned before in other suttas, wherever we have, let's say, the major grouping of the connected discourses, as is the case here, it has a title, Satipatthana Samyutta, dealing with the four establishments or foundations of mindfulness. But then it has the subcategory of Nalanda Vagga, the discourses that were held pertaining to the area of India that's called Nalanda, and that's where the University of Nalanda was, one of the earliest universities in documented human history. So the sutta number is 47.20 from the Samyutta Nikaya, so SN 47.20. It will unravel itself as we go through it. So this is one of the most lovely ways that using imagery where your practice will change by you paying attention to where you fit in this practice, given the imagery provided of Janapadakalyāṇī Sutta. So without further ado, we're going to just jump in today faster. So this is what I personally heard. Once, while the Blessed One was staying in the country of Sumba, people near country of Sumba, near the town of Sedaka, he addressed the bhikkhus and said, "Bhikkhus, yes, Bhante." Those bhikkhus replied, And the Blessed One continued, imagine, bhikkhus, the population in a town, a city, or a region are all told about the most beautiful young woman in all the land, as they keep hearing the announcement being made on how the most beautiful young woman in all the land would soon be appearing in their village, in their city or region. Now, having heard the news, a great multitude of people would show up from everywhere, and soon enough, a great crowd would assemble there. We're always on the lookout of the next thing, the next jolting, agitating thing. Earlier during the meditation, as I was saying a few words to help guide the meditation, I mentioned the importance of getting to a non-agitated state of mind. Human beings, Putujanas, we have a tendency of looking for causes to become agitated. Of course, we don't like to admit this, we don't like to acknowledge this, especially when it comes to becoming agitated from something that is negative. In this example, however, everyone's excited, and that's why they're huddling together to coming to this area. But this is a hypothetical scenario where Lord Buddha is saying, imagine, because a population hears about the most beautiful young woman in all the land, in the world, basically, who will show up at their village. So now everybody, there's a certain speed attached to everything they do in anticipation of this amazing thing that's going to happen. The mind is already agitated. Everyone's excited. You have the same thing happen with, sports events, things like that, where there's a lot of hype going on. Remember, this is the world of Mara. People love to be agitated. And that is the way of adhamma. Going to games, sports events, entertainment events, all these things, we think that they are just fun and games, but in essence, when you look at it through the lens of the Dhamma, you see that it is simply destroying, simply stealing from us the opportunity for understanding. It's just killing time. In fact, researchers and scholars today will look at civilizations, analyze them as to what happened before the fall of this or that empire. They see that there's a sudden increase in the events of an entertainment nature. Sports comes to mind. If you go to Italy, you have the Colosseum. Well, the whole point of it being constructed was because the emperor wanted to keep the minds of the public, the Romans, dull. You become part of the crowd. You don't feel you're standing out so much. You belong suddenly. There's a joint cause. The brain doesn't care about, at that level, it doesn't care about standing for justice. As long as you're standing for something, meaning you're standing for this team versus that. And now we see this happen in the world, politically, globally. You're being squeezed into one of two arenas. You have to decide, you have to tell me Which side do you belong to? Meanwhile, people are dying. But this has become the new form of entertainment in the world. A couple of years ago, it was the war in Ukraine, for example. Now it's something else. A few months ago, it was something else. So that tells us about our civilization. So even more of a reason for us to be focusing in on the practice. And this sutta is all about the practice. Then, on seeing that most beautiful young woman in all the land standing there in front of them, all decorated, making herself even more attractive, as she starts performing for those who are there to witness this most beautiful young woman in all the land, especially as she begins singing seductively and dancing in the most provocative way. The news quickly spreads even more. So now the audience is seeing it's not just physical beauty, but there's action. She's dancing, she's singing. Oh, so now the sutta continues. So on hearing that the most beautiful young woman in all the land is there in that village, city, or region, performing for all gathered, as she continues singing seductively and dancing in the most provocative way, even bigger crowds of people start rushing in to witness this spectacle, gathering in larger crowds around her. The eyes are always looking, the ears are always trying to hear, listen. We always want to know what is happening. Remember, the agitated mind, we have been convinced by our upbringing that that is the normal, good state to be in. In fact, it is the opposite. That's why the modern brain does not enjoy sitting. The body does not enjoy sitting still, because we have been trained into thinking that you must be moving. You must have some movement about you. If not physically, then definitely emotionally or psychologically. And that is not what we see to be truly healthy, especially when we're trying to gain understanding and tranquility. But this is Lord Buddha's way of setting up the scene, as it were. He's establishing the scene for what is to follow. This is the main part of the sutta that's coming up now. Meanwhile, there would be another man who is very much eager to continue living his life, unwilling to die, desiring to be happy, and very much driven to avoid any kind of pain or suffering. So someone who just wants to continue living. Dying is the last thing on his mind. So Lord Buddha is trying to say to us that this person is not in any way willing to give up his life. Now, it so happens that this man is in a situation where he is commanded to obey certain orders. So he's done something that has put him in a very precarious position to follow orders, certain orders. But why? Otherwise, Lord Buddha continues, he says, he would lose his life right on the spot. Thus, he is told the following: Sir, hold this bowl that is full to the brim with oil. Carefully hold it with your hands and carry it with you as you walk among the horde of people gathered there, pacing back and forth between the crowd and the most beautiful young woman in all the land, who is performing right there in front of you and everyone else. Now, we're beginning to see as to why the adjective was added. Janapadakalyāṇī Sutta means the most beautiful young woman in all the land. Okay, why the most beautiful? Because the eyes will want to look at her. Why is she dancing? Because the eyes want to see more. She's singing. Oh, now the ears want to join in. And there's a crowd, so you don't want to be left out. You'll be sticking like a sore thumb otherwise. People are going to make fun of you. You are going to be left out. You're going to miss the show. So all these things happen. So this man is instructed, commanded in fact, to hold a bowl that is full to the brim with oil, carefully holding it in his hands, carrying it as he is commanded to walk back and forth from the edge, from the periphery of the crowd. So he has to move and find his way, navigate through this very eager crowd that wants to look at this woman. He has to find a way in without spilling the oil as he walks towards this dancing, performing, seductive, provocative, whatever woman who is the main attraction. And then what is he going to do? He's going to turn around. Let's see what the other portion of the command is. Also, be aware that there is a giant of a man walking right next to you, an executioner, with his big and very sharp sword that is already pulled out of its scabbard, so it's unsheathed. And having raised it right above your neck, he is fixed on you as you continue carrying the bowl of oil full to the brim, carefully waiting to see the first sign of you spilling even a single drop of oil from the bowl, at which point he will bring down his sharp sword and chop off your head without a moment's hesitation. That can keep you very attentive. When there is a man, when there's a person, in those days they didn't have guns. So imagine someone in modern day, they might not have a sword, but they might have a gun pointed right next to their head. Pulled out, it's cocked, as they say, and the person's finger is on the trigger. So, and they're probably very trigger happy. They're ready to go. The moment they see you spilling, how are you going to spill it? What would drive you to spill it? When you become inattentive. But inattentive for what? What would you alternate your gaze from? Like, why would you lift your gaze away from your bowl of oil? Well, there it is. The dancer. She's there, and everyone is looking and cheering because the noise is not just coming from her, but the screaming crowd. So this is a commotion. This is life. These are the six senses. We're all lost in them constantly. Even if you have your eyes shut, your ears plugged, you sit in isolation chamber. You're not tasting anything. You're not smelling anything. But your mind, that is the biggest internal organ. What is it doing? Is the mind now thinking about the most beautiful young woman in the world? Or is that what it's doing? Or how great it was after the show? You walked away and everyone's talking. Yeah, you remember how she did this and did that, and what was she wearing? All these are examples of you lifting your gaze up, away from the brimful of bowl, brimful with oil, that is. Because the moment you lift your gaze up, you're going to spill. So Lord Buddha gave this airtight example, an analogy, a metaphor, a simile, and a very powerful one, because he was a master at giving poignant, very powerful imagery that would drive the point across. That's why you have so many people, regular people, who didn't know how to read or write. They didn't know much Dhamma either. They didn't know much suttas either, many discourses either. But many of them walked away arahats from these similes. So can we take this example with us? Can you imagine someone standing behind you with a very big, sharp sword that's unsheathed, and it's right there touching your neck almost, and it's very sharp. And he's itching to cut your head off. He's itching because he's not also looking at the lady. He's looking at you, hoping that you look at the lady. Now, what do you think, bhikkhus? Would that man forget about the bowl of oil he was carrying and start looking here and there? Or at that moment, entertaining the crowd? Would he become negligent to keep his attention fixed on the bowl, making sure that despite walking among all the noise and distractions, amidst the crazed crowds of people gathered around him, his attentive eyes would never leave their gaze from that oil-filled bowl he carries, making sure not even a single drop is spilled as he continues pacing back and forth. So he's asking the bhikkhus, would his eyes lift from the bowl? Would he look, check out the dancer, or look at the crowd like, what's wrong with these people? Would he? No. And the bhikkhus say, oh no, Bhante, he would not, replied the bhikkhus. Bhikkhus, I have come up with this simile to make you understand something deep, the meaning of which is the following. Now pay close attention. For the bowl that is filled to the brim with oil is none other than a metaphor for mindfulness that must be aimed at the body. The oil, the bowl full of oil, is a metaphor for the body. So many people have asked what could be a good tool, an instrument, an object of meditation. For students who have developed with metta and gone deep, and it is a very powerful meditation, as I've said it so many times before. But for a great number of people, or the majority, the body seems to be quicker, gives you a quicker access, especially when you're engaged with something, with an activity. Let's say you're at work, you're on the phone, you're walking. So the mind might have a difficulty to drop into loving kindness mode. But it might be able to connect with the breath, for example, or how you're placing your hands on the doorknob. Let's say you're coming out of a room and your mind is all over the place, or your heart is racing, or you're very afraid or worried about something. The moment sati comes in, what do you do with it? The person might have a difficulty connecting with that fear, understanding what's happening, understanding why am I breathing so fast, but they could feel the cool temperature of the doorknob compared to their skin temperature. So if they have trained themselves well, then the body becomes the anchor, which can allow them to drop into quickly to the body on a deeper level, see the heat, the temperature, the agitation in the mind, and then release all those layers and drop into metta, which is a very powerful meditation method. But for many people, it might be the body. And that's what Lord Buddha is saying, and that's what he has used a lot of times to help the practitioner, because you're not only sitting, even with bhikkhus, meditating bhikkhus, they're not just sitting all the time, all their lives. They are doing things. They are lifting the bucket, they're walking here, walking there, cleaning this, putting on their robes, speaking. So you're doing things. For that reason, we have the 4 postures. Yes, walking, standing, sitting, and lying down. But what happens with the transition points or the junction points of these when you're living life? When you're extending your hands, your arms, and bringing them back. All these things are opportunities for your mind to drop into the body, at least initially. Because the bhikkhus, when they heard, or the people, when they heard about the lady, a young, beautiful lady in all the land, they already started, they're a step ahead. They're imagining her hair, her movements, all these things. Already, the last thing they want to think about is mindfulness or sati. Because they're disconnected from the body, their body. Because they're thinking about the body of that person over there. And if you remember from last week's Sutta Exploration, we talked about, we went over the verses of Venerable Ananda. And several times in it, he's talking about things not being what they seem to be. And in reference to some courtesan that people were drooling over just looking at her. And he just kept on dissecting that image in front of their eyes. A body full of sores, he says, covered up in sores. It's just put on with makeup, this, that, waiting, a major debacle waiting to happen. Because everyone's expecting to see something beautiful, something permanent, something unchanging in what is repulsive, something that is not beautiful, something that is changing, not unchanging, something that is very much impermanent. But that's what we do. We like to imagine, leave this here and go there. Nobody's thinking about their own body at that moment. They're fantasizing, visualizing, envying, wanting, craving. But those are the states that we go through on a daily basis. You might not be thinking about the most beautiful young woman in the land. You might be thinking about something else. But something other than that is also taking place, and that is you are mindless of your body. There is asati. There is amanasikara or ayonisamanasikara. There is unwise attention or non-radical attention, meaning placing the attention where it's not supposed to be and not placing it where it's supposed to be, which is the body. So Lord Buddha advises the bhikkhus by saying, thus, bhikkhus, you must train yourselves in this manner. We will practice and continue cultivating our mindfulness aimed at the body, making it our method, the object and vehicle of practice, the foundation of our training, stabilizing and becoming excellent at it, maintaining it as our primary exercise, and thus fully perfect it. So we need to cultivate our mindfulness while aiming it at the body. In fact, the Book of the Ones, Lord Buddha, in the Anguttara Nikaya, numerical discourses, Lord Buddha goes over this so many times. He says the quickest way to experience the deathless element, the deathless, which is Nibbana, is mindfulness aimed at the body. Earlier, I was mentioning before your sit how Webu Sayadaw, his main focus was just focusing on the breath, focusing on the body, basically. And Ajahn Mun would call the body the mountain with many caves, he says. Cave of wonders, he calls it. because you can move, you can feel your body as it's doing something, picking up something while you're eating, while you're turning your head to gaze upon something or someone. Instead of your attention being at the point of trajectory, way out in the distance, it needs to be on the intentionality in the trigger point, which got you to lift your head and want to turn it in that specific direction. That movement, the intentionality behind that. And that's why we do Chankama. That's why we do walking meditation, because we're trying to slow things down. That's what this man in this story is trying to do. Slow things down in a crazy, crazy world where everything is sped up, is fast forwarded, and it's becoming exponentially even faster, growing in faster speeds. If you want to break Sila, fast forward your life. If you want to not break Sila, you need to slow things down. Slowing things down allows mindfulness to grow. You start seeing the gaps between each moment. You start seeing the gaps between each consciousness. You start seeing gaps between the intention of lifting your head, turning it. You're seeing the gaps left and right. And that's why there's the different steps, the different within a single pace while you're doing walking meditation. You're observing before you lift. There's the intentions there. There's also sankharas, the habitual drives coming in to want to move fast through space and time, to cover distances, to finish the end of the walk, to turn around, to come back, to finish your meal quickly. How many times do you actually feel the spoon in your mouth, the fork? How many times do we feel the tongue touching the grains of rice or the noodles or the bread or whatever it is that you're eating? Some months ago, I covered the Indriya Bhavana Sutta, where Lord Buddha again gives a slew of beautiful treasures, basically, of analogies and similes. When it came to the eye, he started with the eye. He says, every time you open and close your eyelids, the eyelashes touch. You need to be mindful. That's a challenge. But it's a beautiful challenge. It's a doable challenge. You can execute that. You can do that and see what happens, what that does to your practice. Because after that person knows that there's a blade at his neck, the moment he lifts his eyes up from the bowl, he's going to drop into this place of stillness. He won't even hear the sound, the crowds, the noise, the people, the sights. Why? Because for him, this man, this blade, and the inevitability of his death, if he has a misstep or has a moment of asati, he knows what will happen. So this creates urgency, and that's what this practice is all about, at least initially, to get the engine going. When we are procrastinating, it means one thing: we are not feeling the urgency of it, basically. When you're wasting time, when you're doing other chores, when you're doing other things, when instead of practicing, you're going and studying books, reading suttas, instead of practicing what they're saying, you're procrastinating. Something in you, the sweet spot hasn't been hit yet, hasn't been reached yet. Why? Because you don't have the urgency yet. Death is a wonderful way of getting close to that, or being at that bullseye, that target. When death happens, or sickness, when we realize that we are decaying and we're getting closer to death. You know, Lord Buddha never talked about growth as such. We grow old. That term, the verb that is used in English language, we growing old. I grew older. That growing part is not there. Instead, there is decay, rotting, eroding, getting closer to death, marana. So here is what Lord Buddha is instructing, advising the bhikkhus to do. They need to be functioning on that level of dedication to mindfulness aimed at the body. When Venerable Amruta was asked again and again and again about how did he become an arahant, how did he have those special powers, how was he able to manage, handle pain, suffering, sickness, he would always say mindfulness. He would always say sati. In fact, he would call it the actual satipatthana, he would say. Practicing the 4 establishments of mindfulness, he would say. There's so many suttas from the Samyutta Nikaya dedicated to Venerable Anuruddha, and they are just boom, 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 the same response, no matter the question. Therefore, because this is how you must train yourselves day and night. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Sometimes people think that the different principles that Lord Buddha talked about are different principles altogether from each other, different as in separate from one another. They're not. Today, I just talked about the Satipatthana. By the way, the Satipatthana, remember, it's Kayanupassana, which is mindfulness aimed at the body, relating to the body. That's not just watching the breath, for example. That's also observing the body in motion. When it's extending, it's flexing. When you're walking forward, backwards, you're walking. So there's sampajanya there as well. But there's the other aspects of the body as well, which most people don't look at. We've covered this in the Satipatthana. Today we covered the Satipatthana Sutta, but looking at the repulsive nature of the body, specifically when we look at, let's say, a cemetery or cremation ground, seeing the body going through the different phases. What happens? Do you cringe and look away when you see a dissection? That's a great opportunity to bring mindfulness, aiming it at the body, because you and that person being dissected share the same anatomy in a sense. That's why you're looking away, because you just saw the rib cage. Ooh, I have a rib cage. There's this primal disgust, but it's an opportunity to also anchor yourself in the inevitability of impermanence, of decay and rotting and death. Your skin is not going to be glowing all the time. You're not going to heal as fast as you would when you're a child, compared to being 70, 80, 90. And then the second one it would be Veda-anupassana. This is second as in from the Satipatthana. Then there's the Chitta-anupassana, so the feeling. And then Chitta-anupassana, the different states that you go through in your heart. The different states. You're feeling amazing now. The mind is so calm. Suddenly there's nothing. Or there's a state of equanimity when you sit. Other times you sit, there isn't that. There's a state of agitation. And then there's the feeling that arises in response to that. That feeling would be now Veda-anupassana. You switch gears. You see these fluctuations. Satipatthana doesn't let anything slip by. especially when you get to the deeper aspect of, or the deep end of the Satipatthana, which is the Dhammanupassana, the different states, the mind objects that keep happening, coming in. All of a sudden, you're dealing with hindrances, for example, or you're looking at the breakdown of what a human being is, meaning rupa, vedana, sanya, sankhara, vijnana, the different aspects of it, playing around. You also look at the satta bojjhangas, for example, or even the four noble truths. The person will see these things, or the three characteristics of existence. You will see it happen. So, but you have to start from somewhere. Lord Buddha is encouraging these bhikkhus. In other discourses, you see Lord Buddha discussing the enormous value of the Brahmaviharas, for example. In this case, it's such a short distance to drop the mindfulness into the body. You don't have to visualize, you don't have to think about anything, you're just dropping back into the body, which most of us are not doing. Now, another aspect of the Dhamma is, especially in the context of what would be required for someone to walk through a crowd like this, and I'm presuming it's at night, so there's music playing. So now there's more of a focus on her, the spotlight is on her, the dancing, this woman, etc. And he's having to walk through the crowd. What would it be, the thing or the series of things that would allow a person to pull it off and not look up? Here you can think of the four bases of psychic power, or the capacities that enable one to have psychic powers. These are the four, iddhipada. First, the person needs to have a desire, powerful, fervent interest and desire to do the thing that they're about to do. When someone has a sharp blade at your neck, unless the person is crazy, I mean, the one who has their neck at the knife point, otherwise, you will be very present. Why? Because remember, the Lord Buddha said this person has all intentions in the world to stay alive. So he wasn't suicidal. So you have at that moment the desire to keep staying alive, to survive that night. Sure, you want me to walk with the bowl of oil and not spill it? I'll do it. I don't care. I will do it. That desire is powerful. That's necessary. And that is also necessary for establishing and maintaining sati. You must have the reason or reasons to be practicing. You must have a compelling reason to practice. This is not a fad. This is not an accessory to our lifestyle when we meditate, when you want to keep precepts. It won't last long. If it's, you're trying to fit in a crowd, or it's a cultural thing, or it's the new thing, you want to talk about it in parties or whatever, that's not it. It will fade away. But if your chanda, if your desire is strong, that's going to enable you to really put in the effort, which is the second iddhipada. Persevering effort, you're going to fuel it, you're going to add more and more fuel to that desire to make yourself go on, to pursue that drive. So chanda can also be called a drive, the intense drive to want to do something, but you need to fuel it. That's the second one, which is virya. Then you have to have a directed mind, or intuitive knowing, intuitive understanding, something that will come and add another layer of finesse to it, perfect that energy, that combination of energy mixed with desire. You need to direct it. And then you have, and that's chitta. And then the fourth one is vimamsa. Vimamsa means the examination. Am I going in the right direction or not? Is this sati or asati? Because you might be fixated on the crown that she's wearing, let's say this dancer, performer, or the earrings she has on, or her figure. The person might be giving 100% of his attention on something other than what he needs to be doing. Vimamsa is going to come, the examining, the investigation. That part of the mind comes in and says, what are you doing? That's not what we're supposed to be attentive of. If you want to keep your neck intact. So, you see, they're all joined. They're not different things. The principles that Lord Buddha talked about, sometimes people have this thinking that, oh, these are different. Satipatthana is one thing, the Noble Eightfold Path is completely different, the 7 factors of awakening is totally different, and the 4 bases of psychic powers are totally different. No, that's not true. You complicate your life, and in fact, you will give up. No, they work together. Oftentimes, they have different names, because in a different context, they show up as something else, in the name of something else, as a different term, but essentially it's the same. Why? Because they're all taking you to the deathless if you're doing it right. So you see, this sutta is not about simply a most beautiful woman in the land type of a thing. This has to do with the person holding the bowl of oil to the brim, full to the brim. He's the main attraction. He's the main protagonist of this story that Lord Buddha weaved to teach the bhikkhus a lesson. But you don't have to be a bhikkhu living in 26 centuries ago to see the relevancy of this sutta to you, for you. So now I'm going to, apparently we will be able to cover the second sutta. That's good. And if you have any questions, please put a note there so we can address it. So this sutta again comes from the Samyutta Nikaya. Samyutta Nikaya is such a treasure trove of suttas because they're not that long, most of them, and they are just connected thematically. There is no other order to them. Basically, it's like a forest, a jungle of suttas, of discourses. But fortunately, the compilers of the canon, they organized them as best as they could. So you have thousands of these suttas that have so many different analogies and metaphors, similes, we call them. So this one is from the Salayatana Samyutta, which happens, Salayata means the 6 sense bases or the 6 sense spheres. Spheres because 6 senses, you have the internal ones, and then you have the external ones. So this is about the external ones. And it comes from the Samudda Vagga. Samudda means ocean. Another word for ocean, a great body of water or sea. This is the Paṭhama Samudda Sutta. The ocean, part 1. Paṭhama means part 1. So this one is Samyutta Nikaya, 35.228. So SN 35.228. So let's dive in. So I would like you to see the relevancy as to why these suttas, I found them to be so closely tied in. What might be, as you're listening to these words? Bhikkhus, the Putujjana or the undisciplined and dense person keeps on saying, the ocean, as he gazes upon the vast ocean. However, bhikkhus, according to the noble one's discipline, that is not what is to be understood as the ocean, for that is merely a great body of water, simply a large body of water. And who can debate? The ocean is a huge body of water. Sometimes it's endless, especially if you're flying over an ocean, like the Pacific or the Atlantic. It feels like it's forever, unending, let alone when you're standing on land and looking at it. So Lord Buddha is saying that's not the ocean as far as the Dhamma is concerned. Let's see, what is the ocean? Instead, it is the I, bhikkhus, that is to be seen and understood as truly the ocean for the person. Meanwhile, its forcefully rippling waves happen to be the countless visible forms and sights which the eye sees. Imagine the ocean is the eye. And the many, many countless waves that are generated by the ocean are the visible things that you see, the sights. He continues, now know this, bhikkhus, whoever is able to withstand those endless currents of powerful waves of visible forms, while coming out unscathed from all the sights the eye sees, is the only one who is declared to have truly traversed the eye ocean. The eye ocean. He is the one, indeed, who has faced and endured its turbulent waves and menacing undercurrents, its whirlpools, its many sharks and other dangerous animals, as well as its demons. That man earlier who was walking in the crowd had to navigate through the ocean of the eye, or the eye ocean, because the powerful whirlpool, the powerful or dangerous animals like sharks and demons were all there. You must have experienced something like that when you sit with your eyes closed in meditation, and the mind gets agitated and you suddenly want to open your eyelids, especially if there's a cause. At least your mind wants to make one up. There's a noise, there's a sound, something moves. What do? Hey, open the eyes, open the eyes. Who knows what might happen? What might happen? Something might be crawling up your leg. Meanwhile, it's nothing. It's just the wind, the breeze, if you're sitting outside. And then you open, you see nothing's happening, and you close again. And then you say, I'm never going to open my eyes again while I'm sitting. And then what happens? You hear a voice. What do? You open your eyes again obediently. Obedient to what? Your tendencies, your sankharas, your habitual patterns. You did not have the urgency to keep your eyes nailed together, the eyelids, I mean. It has to be compelling for you to see something and not see it, not want to see it, walk away from it. That's key. So if a person is watching, let's say, very provocative, seductive images, but somehow wanting to maintain precepts, how is that going to work? Because you're feeding your mind, your subconscious mind at least, tons and tons of information that's going to work against you. Especially when, let's say, you go to sleep, or when you're pushed into a difficult position or demanding situations. It's going to come out of you. You're going to do things that are going to make you break precepts. Your sila is going to be broken. So what is it that you're looking at? So the wave, when it comes, it's going to topple you, throw you around. when I had gone to the big island of Hawaii years ago as a layman, I had heard about this cove-like bay, not a bay, but it's basically a small beach. It had, they told me about this lovely, white sandy beach type of a place. So I go there. And then I see the sign that's placed there, and a lot of locals, native Hawaiians were there. And they saw that I wanted to go into the water. There wasn't that many people, just locals knew about this. And they said, be careful, because the sign also said there's an undertow. It's like a very powerful current. And I'm a big man size-wise, and I looked at these native Hawaiians, and they were big, heavier, big. So I'm thinking there's no way they will be taken over, toppled over, eaten up by these very powerful undercurrents or waves. But I saw them standing at the edge of the waves on the sand. They didn't want to go in. So I waited and waited, and they said, okay, now it's okay, you can go. They went in as well. But unbeknownst to us, there was a rogue wave that came in. And I was surprised. I didn't go deep, but it came in, and I thought, I'm just going to float up, and just as I had known how, I just float up and just lift my feet off the sand and just be available in the water, buoyant. And that should be fine. No, the current, powerful current came in. It was almost like a horizontal whirlpool. And it was, alligators or crocodiles have this thing that they do. It's called a death roll. Death roll. When they grab an animal, a prey, they start rolling until the animal dies, and then they take them down into the bottom of the river or whatever until it dies. So I was taken in by this current, this wave, and I kept being rolled like that, like a sushi roll. And it was not a pleasant experience, and it was not that much water, but the current was so strong that it didn't care. So I came outside completely frazzled and shaken up. My ears were full of sand. And one of the Hawaiian individuals, they came in and they asked me if I was okay. And I said, yes, I'm fine, but I think. So he said, now you know why. It's dangerous waters. But there were other people who also went through that. So anyhow, the wave is powerful. That you can deal with, the physical part. But what we are going through on a daily basis with the eyes, remember, over 72% of information is taken in by the eyes, which we use to interpret, see, understand, and live life. So this is extremely important to understand when Lord Buddha calls the eye the ocean, because you don't know what to expect in the ocean. There might be sharks. There might be other dangerous animals or demons. And that's why a bhikkhu, when they go on Pindapata, they're not supposed to look up, because you might come across a demon or two on your path. A demon as in two-legged demon. A fragrant smelling, I don't know, lovely sounding Janapadakalyāṇī, a beautiful young woman of the land type of a thing, waiting for you to put that, bowl of rice into your bowl while looking at you. Are you going to take her with you on your return to the monastery, at least in your mind? Are you going to take her in your heart? Is she going to accompany you? Those are demons. The sounds The eyes, well, now it's just the eye that Lord Buddha is talking about. But we're constantly, it doesn't have to be a human being, it could be a car, it could be something that's visually triggering. So this is where your sati has to be impeccable to detect it. There's nothing wrong with you catching it. And then bring your attention back. Because that's how you're going to remain unscathed. Not tossed around or eaten up, gobbled up by the abyss of the whirlpool. Thus, having crossed over, the Brahman stands on dry land on the farther shore. In this case, the Brahman is the Arahant, who has gone completely beyond the ocean. Further, bhikkhus, the ocean, it is the ear that is to be seen and understood as truly the ocean for the person. Meanwhile, its forcefully rippling waves happen to be the countless audible sounds which the ear hears. Have you noticed what is your internal environment like when you hear a certain sound compared to another type of a sound? When it's a yell, a scream, a screech of brakes, let's say a car passing by, versus lovely music or something like birds. They're both sounds. How I interpret it is different. I like one versus hate the other. Already I'm stuck in the ocean. I'm in the whirlpool. Now know this, bhikkhus, whoever is able to withstand those endless currents of powerful waves of audible sounds while coming out unscathed from all the sounds the ear hears is the only one who is declared to have truly traversed the ear ocean. So far we covered the eye ocean, now we're getting through the ear ocean. So we're navigating through these oceans. But so far, we're just like driftwood, being tossed around, left and right, up and down, destroyed. Well, guess what the driftwood was? It was part of a ship, a vessel. But it's still being tossed around and slapped around. It's exhausting, isn't it? Being trampled upon by these waves. And then Lord Buddha says, he is the one indeed who has faced and endured its turbulent waves and menacing undercurrents, its whirlpools, its many sharks and other dangerous animals, as well as its demons. Thus, having crossed over, the Brahmin stands on dry land on the farther shore. In other words, I see Lord Buddha saying you are responsible for what goes on into your eyes, comes in through your ears, how you behave based on these waves that are coming at you. Whether it's sound waves, like in this case, or whether it's visual waves. Where is your attention going? In the suttas, we have examples of bhikkhus looking and someone runs in front of them, a woman, let's say. They're sitting in the forest and a woman runs, let's say a courtesan or something was with her crowd of people, even naked. And his eyes are looking in a certain direction. She crosses his line of vision, line of sight. And then people come and nudge, tell him, ask him, like, did you see a woman? And he says, well, I didn't see any woman. Well, we see that these are her footprints. She ran in front of you. And in fact, we were running after her, so we saw you didn't move. So you must have seen her. Well, he says, I didn't see a woman. A naked woman. You haven't seen a naked woman? We saw her. He's like, I didn't see that. What I did see, however, is was a collection of skeleton, bones. That's what I saw, he says. Now, he wasn't being poetic, he wasn't being dramatic, or that's what he saw. That means this bhikkhu, this person, this meditator, knows how to surf those waves. There's no way that any wave is going to take him down. Whether it's a sound wave, visual wave, doesn't matter. And the way to do that is sila, samadhi, panya. Sila, precepts, because it protects you. Samadhi is the meditation part, where we started talking about sati and sampajanya, when you slow things down, your attention. So these suttas are here to help us to sharpen your sati by slowing things down, at least initially. So please don't rush, especially when you're doing walking meditation. Or even if you don't do walking meditation, when you're moving the body, don't do it automatically. When you're brushing your teeth, when you're reaching over to open a door, can you feel the temperature of the doorknob? Can you feel the air that comes in when you open the door? Or the air that rushes out when you open the window? Can you feel the texture of the curtains? Smell. What hits your eyes first when you wake up? That requires curiosity, which is part of chanda, by the way, which I was mentioning earlier about iddhipadas. Further, bhikkhus, it is the nose that is to be seen and understood as truly the ocean for the person. Meanwhile, its forcefully rippling waves happen to be the countless odors which the nose smells. Do you quickly rush to judge, label the smell that you take a whiff of, good or bad? Do you go, oh, you go, wow, what is that? Or do you look at, oh, look at that, look at that, look at that? You turning the gaze upon the nose itself. Have you ever smelled the nose? Have you ever heard the eardrum? Not the sound that the eardrum hears, but heard what the eardrum is doing. In this case, what the nose is doing. Are you there when it senses something, smells something? Or are you just up there running with, the routine, lost in the process? Or are you sticking with the nose? Stick to the nose, Lord Buddha is saying. There's a lot happening. Now know this, because whoever is able to withstand those endless currents of powerful waves of odors and fragrances, while coming out unscathed from all the odors the nose smells, is the only one who is declared to have truly traversed the nose ocean. He is the one indeed who has faced and endured its turbulent waves and menacing undercurrents, its whirlpools, its many sharks and other dangerous animals, as well as its demons. Thus, having crossed over, the Brahmin stands on dry land on the farther shore. It's interesting, with all of these senses, sense doors, we're always dealing with the extremes of the pendulum, aren't we? I like it or I hate it. That's where the mind likes to get agitated. The heart gets agitated, right? That's where the action part comes in. It likes action. The mind likes to be in movement. Well, that's not the state of a Brahmin, an Arahant. We need to slow things down. The nose, it either loves the smell or it hates it. Oh, the smell of a fresh baked bread. Oh, you're walking down, or the smell of this, restaurant, especially when you're hungry, oh, it comes in, or the smell of sewage. Some of the travels I've done, especially after like small villages without that much of a, let's say, good solid infrastructure, where the sewage system is not the best, shall we say, and it rains, pours, but you have to cross the street. As you're crossing the street, yes, there's a lot of water, but there's also, along with it, nasty smell, not to say what other stuff that your eyes are going to catch. So you really have to navigate, watch where you're stepping, look for those dry areas, so you don't accidentally step on something. Cesspool water, basically. So what do you think the nose is going to do with that? Oh, from one extreme to the next, one extreme to the next. In both cases, the person is being toppled, carried over by the whirlpool, sucked into the abyss. I like it, I don't like it. This is being done to me, I hate it. Identification, asmimana. Why does this thing always happen to me? Etc. Further, because it is the tongue that is to be seen and understood as truly the ocean for the person. Meanwhile, its forcefully rippling waves happen to be the countless flavors which the tongue tastes. Now, know this, because whoever is able to withstand those endless currents of powerful waves of flavors and tastes, while coming out unscathed from all the flavors the tongue tastes, is the only one who is declared to have truly traversed the tongue ocean. He is the one indeed who has faced and endured its turbulent waves and menacing undercurrents, its whirlpools, its many sharks and other dangerous animals, as well as its demons. Thus, having crossed over, the Brahmin stands on dry land on the farther shore. Imagine you're tasting your favorite dish from the restaurant place or in someone's home, but somebody, whoever made it, did not put enough salt in it. It's ruined. It's not the same. I was excited because I was about to have that food, and now I have that food, but it's not the same food. It ruined it because I had images, I had expectations. So now I hate this. Where's the salt shaker? Give me the salt. Give me. Or you want to go to or try to get the thing that you like to eat, and you get there, but it's closed. Or they don't have the product that you like to have. They discontinued. What do? Oh, it's ruined. You get angry. Just like you got angry when you smelled that nasty cesspool odor coming in, especially if it's in the middle of the night and the windows, you have to open the windows because it's hot and humid. AC is not doing it because the AC, when it's blowing, guess what air it's blowing? Sewage air. Even though you're on the third or fourth floor, it's coming in. The window, same thing. So what is the mind doing? That's what Lord Buddha is asking. What is the mind doing? Because that's what makes these things, these oceans, powerful. That's why Lord Buddha is talking about the strong stream of current, the waves, like this tsunami coming at us repeatedly. If it's not the eye tsunami, it's the ear tsunami. If it's not the ear tsunami, it's the nose or the tongue tsunami. Further, because it is the body that is to be seen and understood as truly the ocean for the person. Meanwhile, its forcefully rippling waves happen to be the countless tactile objects which the body touches. We like certain textures, we hate certain textures. What is the mind being left on its own devices at that moment when these emotions are coming up, when these feelings? Because Lord Buddha didn't say you're going to, from the start, be able to somehow magically not experience the ocean. He didn't say that. You have to navigate it. You have to traverse it. But how do you do it? Earlier, the other sutta, he was mentioning how the mindfulness is to be aimed at the body. That still holds true here, but the way I'm presenting it now, in this context, I'm also describing the feeling attribute involved to the experience of smelling, tasting, and now touching. What is the feeling? So the feeling itself, now you could jump in from Kaya Anupassana to Vedana Anupassana. Vedana Anupassana, or the sensation, watching is it pleasurable, or is it painful, or is it neutral? You're observing those, so that becomes an entry point for samadhi. So you're not just standing there like, a guard, just being, firm. No, there needs to be wisdom there. There needs to be understanding developed. Because your understanding will take you to understanding vijnana. Lord Buddha says, wisdom must be developed, consciousness must be understood. The sense awareness, that's what we understand by conscious. You could think of it like that. What sense awareness? Well, we just went over the 5. Using the 5 senses in this case. He's talking about the 5 strands of, so far, of sensuality. But Lord Buddha, because this is coming from the Salayatana Vagga, Salayatana Samyutta, we also have the mind here, which is the big one, the most powerful one. The mind, because it constantly will spit out of its factory. It will keep manufacturing new and new and new and new mind objects ceaselessly by using whatever input it gets, whatever comes its way, making up stories, developing relationships towards these things, even memories. So, but before we go to that one, we just finished this. Now know this, bhikkhus, whoever is able to withstand those endless currents of powerful waves of tactile objects while coming out unscathed from all the tactile objects the body touches is the only one who is declared to have truly traversed the body ocean. He is the one indeed who has faced and endured its turbulent waves and menacing undercurrents, its whirlpools, its many sharks and other dangerous animals, as well as its demons. Thus, having crossed over, the Brahmin stands on dry land on the farther shore. So, we have a body, yes. And don't think of it just in the form of like tactile, just it's a soft surface or rough, harsh surface. Not just that. Your chair. It could be the flight of stairs you have to take instead of the elevator because it doesn't work. So now you have to exert energy, more so than you did before. You park your car, or you miss the bus. You park the car not at your normal, usual spot because someone else is parked there now. So you have to park it far. So now you have to walk. What's happening to the body? The body, because of this new situation, circumstance, what is it doing to your internal atmosphere, to your feelings? And what are those feelings doing to the mind? Are you transported into the past or into the future? Or are you still staying in the eternal present? Are you watching what's happening? That is how you're going to end up on the dry land along with the other arahants on the farther shore. Not by being lost in the stories of these oceans. Further, because it is the mind that is to be seen and understood as truly the ocean for the person. Meanwhile, its forcefully rippling waves happen to be the countless mind objects and thoughts which the mind thinks about and cognizes, also including the memories. Now know this, bhikkhus, whoever is able to withstand those endless currents of powerful waves of mind objects while coming out unscathed from all the thoughts and perceptions the mind cognizes and processes, is the only one who is declared to have truly traversed the mind ocean. He is the one indeed who has faced and endured its turbulent waves and menacing undercurrents, its whirlpools, its many sharks and other dangerous animals, as well as its demons. And boy, do we have demons in our mind. But we never ask. The mind object, we never look at it as a mind object. We just see it as you. You did that to me. I'm never going to forgive her for doing that. Well, hold on. She's not even in the room. In fact, she hasn't been in your life for the last 20 years. Where did this come from? Like this anger? The mind object. Something got triggered. Maybe you smelled something and you reminded you of this and that ricocheted all the way. And it's like, yeah, it was that person. He did this to me. Mind object. It's just mind creating mind objects. That's it. Mind creating mind objects. The first verse of the Dhammapada is all about this. Mano pubbangama dhamma. Mano setha mano maya. Mind is the one that precedes all mind states. Everything, all thoughts are generated by the mind. Mind is the leader. Mind made are they. So mind is the manufacturer, is the conjurer of tricks. Mind is the one that makes this illusion. The world that you have accepted for yourself as this is my life, this is who I am, is the product of not your environment. I'm sorry. It is the product of your mind. But this is not something that go, oh, really? Okay, that changes everything. No, 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 no. We have been trained in thinking like that. And that's why we need to slow things down, to see the gaps, to see the wrong connections we've made throughout our life. Because there's so many errors. My dad, years ago, when we had, cassette tapes, what he would do is oftentimes, sometimes they would get stuck. The player would we would call it like it ate it up, is eating up the tape. So now it's all jumbled up, so you have to pull it out, and sometimes it's unretrievable section of the tape. So what he had to do was he would straighten it out and then cut it and then tape a section. So you would miss a section from the tape. It's gone. And then you would hear it, but at least you kind of saved the rest of the tape's life, so you can still listen to whatever the content was. I tried a few times, but then I would put the tape in the wrong place, and then you're trying to hear it again. It's not the right connection. I didn't do it right. So if you replay the tape, it might replay because you taped it right, but the order is not right. So we have different modes of interpreting life, most of which are the result of emotions, which are based on wrong view. That's why Lord Buddha started with right view. The very first is the view has to be fixed. You might be practicing for all intents and purposes, and others might think that you are practicing the Dhamma proper in your mind. You might even have followers. You might even have, I don't know, the belief that you're on the right track, or even have attained. Right view has to be applied. Right view is the thing that will make it work. Otherwise, if it's wrong view, it's gone. There are teachers out there who have thousands of students. The teachers might have died even. Well, guess what? The blind was leading the blind. There was no Dhamma ultimately because the view was wrong. What do you do? What do you say to that? What do you say to that? All the wrong sections of tapes taped together. It sounds right for the person. That's why we need to come back to the suttas and read the suttas, understand the suttas, not just one that we like or a few that we like. We like to interpret it any way we want. It has to make sense dhammically, and that's why right view is number one, because otherwise it's just emotion-based, and that's what you have in the world today. A lot of emotion-based. That's why the world is on fire. Lord Buddha also gave the sermon, the fire sermon, to the 1,000 paribhajakas, the fire worshipping yogis who became bhikkhus. By the end of that Dhamma discourse, all of them became arahants. And if today we're not becoming arahants in the world, you're not seeing that many arahants. Why? It's because people are holding on to their wrong view. People had more courage at the time of Lord Buddha to relinquish the moment they saw the wrong view they held, no matter how long they've kept it. Those 1,000 yogis were the students of 3 brothers, 3 masters. One had 500 students, the other one had 300, the other one had 200. That humility is necessary, which is missing. That's why the world is on fire. Everybody's trying to jump on someone else's neck, to crush, to destroy. You don't have to attack anyone. You just have to watch out for these oceans. 6 oceans that you're dealing with, you're navigating through on a daily basis. You don't even have to have enemies outside. You don't need any enemies. There are no enemies ultimately outside of you. The 6 senses are plenty. One time a bhikkhu came and asked Lord Buddha, and he said, Bhante, what is Mara? I want to know what Mara is. Who is Mara? And Lord Buddha goes and says, it's your 6 senses, the salayatana. What happens between the eye and the object? That is where Mara exists. What you do with them brings Mara to life if it is following a wrong view. You have your work cut out for you as far as having an enemy, because the main objective, the main work is always with you. You don't have to go to a 9-to-5 job to be working if you're doing good practice. You're always busy. That's why I was saying the other day how a practicing individual works harder than, especially if it's a bhikkhu or a monastic, they're working harder than a hardworking layman at the stock market, inside the stock exchange. If you've ever seen video footage of them, they're like crazy, ants. Because you're always alert, you're always seeing what's happening. You're looking for those mind objects. Thus, having crossed over, the Brahmin stands on dry land on the farther shore. This is what the Blessed One said. Then, having uttered those words, the Sugata, the fortunate one, the great teacher, spoke these verses. The one who has traversed the vast ocean, so hard to cross, navigating through its menacing currents, whirlpools, and forceful waves, its countless dangerous animals and sharks and demons too. The true master of knowledge, completing the goal of the holy life, reaches the world's end and is thus recognized as the one who has gone beyond indeed. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. As you see or heard, it's a beautiful sutta. And we're so grateful for the elders who have kept the Dhamma alive by reciting these suttas, and we have them now. And we have just added our contribution, shared it. So I hope this helps your practice grow, not decay. So are there any thoughts, comments, questions, either about this sutta or the one previous to that, which we covered today? Remember, they're there for, these suttas are encouragements. It's not to look down upon yourself and say, I'm not doing a good job. No. That's how our standard is going to go higher, better. We improve upon our practice. Oh, I was doing it wrong. There's nothing wrong with that when you come to that realization, if that's the case. Oh, I was doing it all wrong. That's good. That means now you're going to fix your directions. And that's why these suttas are absolutely indispensable.
Bhante,
Yes,
if it's okay, I have a question.
absolutely. Go ahead.
Just in these suttas, there is so much emphasis on urgency and what is at stake. And on the other hand, you talk often about lightheartedness, being gentle and patient, and sort of the other side of it. So I was going to ask about this sweet spot that you mentioned and how to get there.
I believe it was Bodhiraja-Kumara Sutta, where Lord, from the Majjhima Nikaya, middle length discourses, and Prince Bodhi, who was the crown prince, he had invited Lord Buddha to for lunch dana. I think it was from that sutta, if I'm not mistaken. And he asks basically a question just like yours, Kitnini, in essence, because he was asking about where's the sweet spot? I mean, he wasn't using those terms, of course, but basically, because Lord Buddha spent over 6 years doing it the hard way, punishing himself. He even says, Lord Buddha says, when I was still a practicing bodhisattva, I was still seeking perfect awakening. I was under the impression that the work that we do on this path needs to be suffering-induced, suffering-based. The outcome has to be only as a result of painful experiences. And that's why you still have in India and other places where it's like, no, it's like, through pain. No pain, no gain type of a thing. And that is absolutely adhamma. Now, the other lifestyle that Lord Buddha already had for 29 years was the opposite, where everything was like, he didn't even ask for anything. It was just golden spoon was right there and placed in his mouth, whatever he wanted. He didn't even had to ask. This is where the Bodhiraja Kumara comes in. Look at the organic, the masterful approach of Lord Buddha's teaching. He looks at, and this is what a great teacher does, he observes, and also a good, very, very, very excellent therapist does as well. You look for things that you could use from the surrounding area of the person who's asking the question. And he looks at Bodhiraja and he says, Prince Bodhi, Crown Prince Bodhi, you have your child with you. That's how we also, I think it was Bodhiraja, anyhow, one of the princes. And he says, what happens if you're feeding your child right now, yes? So you can tell also that they're also eating. And the child has some food in his mouth. And he says, what if your child has that morsel of food stuck in his throat? What would you do? And the prince says, well, I will go in with my finger, he says, and I will pull that food item out of his mouth, of his throat. In fact, this is something he adds, because in fact, even if it means I have to draw blood, even if I have to do it in such a way where it will bleed the throat, but I will pull out that thing that's stuck in his throat. But he will put his finger gently first, depending on how he goes in, based on necessity. So coming back to the question on urgency, sometimes we are in a deep, very dry, stagnant lake bed of inertia in our progress, or we're stuck. So you can't be light-handed on, well, it's okay, no. It's okay, I'm doing my best, so might as well just sit in this. In the diapers, basically. No, you have to go up, get up. You have to pull yourself from your shoestrings even. So you need to muster some energy. So this path has everything to do with applying wisdom. Wisdom means you know how much, for how long, at what intensity. It applies vimansa, which I was mentioning earlier. It's got to be examining what is necessary, what is not. So what you have is a lot of laissez-faire attitude in practitioners, where they don't take things to, as seriously as it needs to be taken. I keep mentioning how important it is to be forgiving, but it's all contextual. That's what I'm trying to say. An eye surgeon has to use, depending on the type of surgery, he has to use different types of needles. He has to use even scalpel, different sizes, to work on this very, very highly sensitive organ, which we call the eye. Now they use lasers, right? But it's a laser. Laser can also cut a person's throat they can decapitate a person with laser. But how you use it, how much do you apply it, for what reason? Again, this brings us back to not just the urgency, because I appreciate your question, because the intensity part is not often discussed. Venerable Sona, who was the son of a very, very wealthy family, he decides to go forth, and he becomes a monk, he becomes a bhikkhu, and he's practicing. Oh boy, is he practicing intensely. And one day, Lord Buddha is looking at his walking path, the Chankama path, and he sees that it's all covered in blood. And he calls the other bhikkhus. He says, "What happened here?" This is Lord Buddha is asking. They say, Bhante, was Venerable Sona. He didn't basically sleep. He kept on walking all day, all night. And he calls over Sona. He says, Sona, I see that. And Lord Buddha knew that he was intent. But the problem was, Venerable Sona had grown up basically being lifted from room to room. He knew how to walk, but they say that the bottom of his feet even had tiny little hairs growing. How many people do you know who have hair growing under their feet? He didn't use them. He didn't need to. Now, out of such a pampered lifestyle, he comes and he does follow that no pain, no gain attitude. That is unwise. Lord Buddha even allowed him to walk, but while wearing sandals. That's why we have that permission added, amendment to the Vinaya rules in a sense. And then Lord Buddha gives him an example, because he knew that despite being a rich kid, growing up, he was also a very talented musician. He knew how to play not the sitar, but another musical instrument, I forgot the name of it, but a lovely Indian musical instrument, which is still used today. Sima? Forgot, anyhow, he says, Lord Buddha, and this is where you get that, story often misquoted in many cases, but basically this is where it's from. Lord Buddha turns to him and says, what happens when you would play and the string is too loose? Would it play? And he says, oh no, Bhante, it won't play. I know, I'm an expert, it doesn't play. And he says, but what happens when you tighten up the string too tight, like too much? Or he says, Bhante, that you cannot play then either, because it won't play the tune right, and in fact, it might even snap. So it's a totally useless piece of musical instrument. He says, when does it play, Sona? And he says, Bhante, when it's just the right sweet spot, the right tension in the string is placed. That right tension is placed on the string, and then it plays perfectly. He says, that's what you need to be doing. And then applying wisdom. So the wisdom must be there in any of these factors. That's why right view is all about wisdom. You don't have, in the Noble Eightfold Path, you don't have samma panya, do you? No, because already right view is part and parcel of panya. It's an aspect of panya. It's so important. That's why it's in the beginning. Even though we have samma kammanta, right action, obviously samma vayama, right effort. Also, we come back to panya. The very important usage of samma means right or correct, indicates the presence of, by proxy, of panya, wisdom. So absolutely, urgency is indispensable. It has to be there, but wisdom is on every single link. Otherwise, the mind is always used to the pendulum. It will take us from one extreme to the other, and then you will burn out. And this is what happens with a lot of people. Many people go on retreats, and guess what they do? 10 days, 1 month, 3 months, they will push themselves. And then that becomes a new habit for a while. And then they leave the retreat. They feel like they're, riding high. Everything is going to be beautiful from now on. And then life happens. They're surrounded by the 6 oceans all the time. They either become too tight and then it snaps, or they go to the other extreme where it's too loose that it can't play. And what do? They abandon the path. I've known people over the course of decades where they even stop practicing sila. Many bhikkhus, especially Westerners, not just Westerners, but especially Westerners, who go and become bhikkhus, they have left. They have disrobed. Because they try hard for whatever reason. Maybe they were inspired by this persona of a teacher or this school or that. And then what do? They leave. They quit. Because it's easy to be on either one of those extremes. It is easy for even Venerable Sona to be working so hard, even to the bleeding point. It's easy when you think of it like that. But to keep that balance, that's hard. It's like walking on a tightrope, but it's not that hard. That's why we have the discourses. That's why we have the teachings intact, if we know how to read them, how to follow them, how to practice them. How is this working for you, Kitmini? Is this making sense? Or if it's drawing more questions out of this, please don't stop.
I hear you saying that it's difficult to find for yourself where that is. And that I think you're saying that to me, that it's through trial and error, and then you see what the result is, and then you modify a little bit. Is that sort of what you're saying?
Modification, yes, but it's not that much of a trial and error. It's not like you're walking into, like, groping in the dark type of a situation where you don't have a clue as to what you need to be doing. Remember, you always need to drop back to the heart. What's happening to the mind? If you're becoming agitated, then you're on the wrong path. Okay? Too much energy, too much aditana is going to create agitation. It's going to create heat. You will never experience nibbana if you're always like this with yourself. For this reason, I always recommend journaling. In some cases, I've also recommended for many students, actually, to go see therapists. I'm not suggesting that you need to see a therapist, personally, but what I'm recommending is sitting with a journal and speaking about as to why you're doing this, why you're practicing this, what is if this is coming from your own personal experiences, let's say, why am I applying so much energy, aditana? What is my fear? Because this might be a good opportunity for you to go digging deeper, to finding a deeper issue at work. One of the worst things we can do to the Dhamma is when we try to use the Dhamma to cover up for something else. And many, many people are doing that. Dhamma is not supposed to be therapy. Wow. Yeah, I said that. Dhamma is not supposed to be therapy. Many people approach the Dhamma expecting their lives to completely change while they're sitting on the cesspool of past ways of thinking, and they're not willing to look at that. They're sitting on a heavy, heavy, soggy diaper, and they're refusing to come out of it, metaphorically speaking. We need to acknowledge that, ooh, there's a stench here. What is that? Let me wash myself. Let me come out of it. Let me address it at least. Many people are using suttas, discourses, concepts, retreats to cover up, attainments to cover up. I've met people who claim to have attained. I've met people who have gone through all the jhanas. But when you sit with them, they're all agitated. You're trying to have a meal. You can't have a meal with them because you feel uncomfortable. You have to walk and sit somewhere else. Meanwhile, these people are supposed to be higher beings. What happened? Because it's all a matter of suppressing, but they suppress it so well. This is in the case where it's absolutely 100% sure that it's an actual jhana. 99% of the time, it's not. Suppression. And the person comes out of the meditation, the ugliness is there with them. Why? Because they never worked through their stuff. So I've given talks on journaling and how important it is. So please sit down and write about your emotions. And this is private. You don't have to show it to anyone. You don't share it with me or anyone unless you feel like you want to. But there's so much that needs to come out sometimes. But what we do is we bulldoze our way through the effort department of the Noble Eightfold Path. Remember, sati has to be there. Sati is the thing which is detecting, okay, something's wrong, and then Dhamma Vichaya comes in. I'm referring now to the 7 factors of awakening. By the same token, there is vidya. So it's not either this or that. So it's not an either or. Please understand that. Most people have this either or mentality, which is detrimental to the path. It's not like that. It's either this or that. It's either I go all the way or none. Sounds familiar? Joy must be present. Dhamma will never enter a heart that is joyless. Please remember that. You cannot force the Dhamma to appear. You cannot, I'm talking about like experience of Nibbana. Sotapatti, becoming a stream winner, having Dhamma Chakku. It is impossible to happen unless you make your heart safe for the Dhamma. Would you have guests come over if they know that it's like a killing zone in your house? Or you're going to beat them to death, or you're going to put them to work? Okay, you go over there and sweep the floors, you wash the dish. No one will come visiting you. Like, this is a crazy lady. We don't want to go to her house. And what kind of a guest center? They're not going to step foot close to you in your zip code. But somehow we're expecting the Dhamma to obey. Well, I have aditana, I have energy. That's why most of those vipassana places, you're not going to get any arahants coming out of it. Why? Because there's so much aditana. They don't even know why it's aditana, why there is aditana. For what? It's like somebody who's trying to walk through a wall by banging their head through a concrete wall that's about 3 meters thick. And they come out and say, oh, why is there such a terrible headache? Wisdom is missing. Remember, Lord Buddha said, we are the happy ones in the Dhammapada. So you must have happiness. And the journaling allows you to see the hiccups, where the misinterpretations are in your own narratives. Each of us have different wrong narratives. If we didn't, we would be arahants by now, by the way. But the more you, by the way, you might not like to write. Some people don't. And this is something I used to do even as a therapist, where I would encourage individuals, patients, to use their phone to voice record. So it becomes a voice journaling. Or if you feel comfortable, to even use video journaling. Make sure it's in a nice, safe folder that no one has access to in your phone, let's say password encoded and stuff. But you speak to it, and all of a sudden a lot will come out. I guarantee it. Because we have to first clean up the house before we allow someone, a guest, to come over, right? So please don't use the Dhamma as a camouflage for something else. So many of us are doing that. That's why I'm saying this. So the sweet spot is there. Yes, it requires effort to even stop, but look at the body. The body will never lie. So if your heart is becoming agitated, if your body becoming more agitated, if your mind is not becoming calm, if the body is not literally cooling down, your skin temperature is going to go down a little bit from the heat. And you're going to become calm, and your facial muscles are going to relax. Those are indications that you're doing what is right. And you're present, and your mindfulness is becoming less and less broken. Those are your telltale signs that you are doing it correctly. So it's not a trial and error. I disagree with that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I'm definitely not becoming more agitated.
Oh, lovely. Good. Good. Yes. Most people forget the Arahants were like us. People from back then, they were like us. If you read Venerable Ananda's words, his behavior here and there, you see how agitated he was. Frustrated, hopeless, sad. I mean, last week we did the Ananda Theragatha. We saw how he, at one point, he even said, I lost the Dhamma, I am lost. Imagine Venerable Ananda with the 84,000 teachings. He said that. Who would be able to say something like that with those qualifications, with that pedigree, if you will? Somebody who was shaken to his roots. That means he was also vulnerable like you and I. So time doesn't mean much. But they work through that. They use that. That's what I'm suggesting here. We must use these as, okay, I know that, so I'm not going to go there. I've been there. I know that. I know where that road leads to. So this is when you're saying yes to this and no to that. Okay, but watch out for those extremes, because Mara loves that. And this pendulum will never stop. Ding, 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 one extreme to the next. It's called the middle path. Remember, Majjhima Pada for a reason. Lord Buddha's coined it. Middle path. That's, in your words, Ketmini, we will call it sweet spot. The Goldilocks. Great question, though. I'm sure many, many, many will relate. So let us transfer some merit. Akasatha chabumata devanaga mahitika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakhantu lokasasanam. Akasatha chabumata devanaga mahitika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakhantu desanam. Akasatha chabumata devanaga mahitika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakhantu mamparanti. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. May you all be well. May the Triple Gems blessings be with you and your loved ones, and may this world be protected. May the four great divine kings protect this world, and may the delusion be removed. May peace prevail. May justice and truth prevail. Harmony prevail, especially in our hearts, and then spread all over. So may the eye of Dhamma open for everyone. Sukhiyoto. Till next week. Be well.